increase the side yard setbacks from 5 feet to 3 feet.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city's website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Let's please take a moment to acknowledge their history. There are no commission minutes to consider for this evening. So we'll move on to informational items. Are there any informational items from staff?
Just one, Chair. We understand from our audiovisual person here that there seem to be some issues with the Comcast feed for Channel 30. So if folks are having trouble with that, they can watch on YouTube live as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So this is now an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Does any audience member wish to comment on an item that is not on tonight's commission agenda? All right. Moving forward, the next agenda item is an appeal of a type 2 variance to the minimum setbacks at 2918 Southeast Balfour Street. The public hearing on appeal file AP-2026-002 is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider an appeal filed by Amanda Cartwright challenging the approval of file VR-2026-008, a type 2 variance to reduce the side yard setbacks at the property located at 2918 Southeast Balfour Street. The appeals process requires that the commission conduct an unrestricted de novo hearing, which allows for the presentation of new evidence, testimony, and arguments by any party. The applicable standard of review is set forth in zoning ordinance subsection 19.1010.3, types of appeal hearings. A successful appeal requires that the commission determine that the initial decision has findings and/or conditions that are in error as a matter of fact or law. The original decision was based on applicable standards and criteria of the Milwaukie Municipal Code. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the standards and criteria can be found.
Thank you. The applicable sections for the original decision were Milwaukie Municipal Code Section 19.301, the Moderate Density Residential Zone, or R-MD, subsection 19.505.4, Building Design Standards for Cottage Cluster Housing, Chapter 19.700, Public Facility Improvements, Section 19.911, Variances, and Section 19.1005, Type 2 Review.
Thank you. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address a criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes further appeal based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response precludes an action for damages in circuit court. This decision will be the City of Milwaukee's final local decision on land use file VR-2026-008. Does any member of the commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Does any member of the commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Does any member of the commission wish to report on any ex parte contacts?
As ex parte contact, I live in the Ardenwald neighborhood, and we have a neighborhood WhatsApp chat thread. And the appellant raised a question, a generic question about this on that thread. I didn't respond, and there was nothing unique or different than what we see in the record here, but I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you. Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to this hearing please raise their hand? Did any commissioners who visited the site speak to anyone at the site or note anything different from what is indicated in the staff report for this application? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter? Let's proceed to the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Thanks to folks for coming out tonight. My name is Brett Kelver. I'm one of the planners here with the city, and I worked on the original variance file and will walk you through the appeal case tonight. So just some quick, to set the scene, some quick background. So this property at 2918 Southeast Balfour, it's in the Ardenwald neighborhood. It's zoned RMD, or moderate density residential. It's a relatively typical lot in the neighborhood in terms of size. It's just under 9,000 square feet. It's currently developed with a single detached house and a detached garage or shop structure. It's on Balfour Street, just west of the Balfour Park, kind of recently redeveloped and improved, and also very close to the corner of 29th Avenue, which is the neighborhood greenway. The zoning for the site, as I mentioned, is RMD, moderate density residential. There are no other special overlays in terms of natural resources or Willamette Greenway review. Just to the south of this area, as you can see in the image, there's the high density residential zoning that's in this area, primarily where the hillside development and redevelopment site is. There's also the North Milwaukie employment area just to the west, but it's a little more physically separated. There's some railroad tracks and a steep grade. So the primary zoning in this area is RMD. As of 2021, some things have changed in our zoning code with the implementation of middle housing rules, and the RMD zone now allows a lot more variety and density of residential development in areas that previously were more accustomed to just seeing single unit development or maybe duplexes on large lots. And part of this is coming from a larger statewide effort to address the shortage of housing, provide more diverse housing options for a variety of needs and incomes. And this has been happening in conjunction with the statewide end to requirements to provide off-street parking with development. And part of the idea there was to make more land available for housing, to help keep housing costs down and encourage multiple travel modes as part of addressing climate concerns. So just to be clear, off-street parking is no longer required with most development, but that doesn't preclude developers from choosing to provide off-street parking depending on their particular site and their goals. So in addition to single unit development, duplexes, the RMD zone now allows other what we call plex development, so triplex, quadplex development, as well as townhouses and the cottage cluster concept. At least for cottage clusters are allowed on lots that are at least 7,000 square feet, as this one is. So just to cover the proposed development, so this is being redeveloped, the proposal is as a 7-unit cottage cluster. So the proposal includes retaining the existing house, demolishing the detached shop or garage, and constructing 6 new units. So that existing house will be considered a cottage as well as the 6 new units. They're all proposed to range around 850 square feet to just over 1,000 square feet in area. And as you can see where unit 2 is proposed, that's kind of units 2 and 3 are where the current driveway is. That would be replaced with a single space driveway parking spot just kind of in front of unit 1. The cottage cluster rules include a requirement to provide at least 150 square feet of common area per unit. So in this case, the requirement is about 1,050 square feet. And that common area, as proposed here, is kind of towards the rear of the development in between more or less units 4, 5, 6, and 7. The setback requirements for cottage clusters, at least for the rear and the sides, are 5 feet. There is a proposal here, and the variance request was to reduce those the side yard setbacks, at least for units 5, 6, and 7. And those setback reductions are circled here in this diagram. Reduce it from 5 feet to 3 feet. That's a 40% reduction, and that is a type of variance that is covered in our code as what's called a type 2 variance. It's an administrative variance, and the idea is that these are considered to be relatively small, almost mathematically based adjustments that are generally considered approvable. We're usually just looking to see if there are some kind of impacts that might could be mitigated with screening or fencing or something like that. Those decisions are handled by the planning manager, and when the decision is issued, there's an appeal period, which is what we went through today, and we've arrived at the appropriate appeal party, which is the planning commission, kind of considering challenges to the planning manager decision. I will say, in terms of the larger context here, some of the specific state legislation that's been passed recently. I'm thinking of Senate Bill 1537, has required that local jurisdictions almost approve automatically a lot of these kind of small scale adjustments. And there are a couple of options that local jurisdictions have had. Is either basically just approve all the variances or apply for an exemption, which is what Milwaukie did. We said, we have a variance process. We approve most of those type 2 variances, but we would like to retain the ability to impose conditions in some cases. And so we have chosen that exemption route so that we can still consider things on a case-by-case basis. The type 2 process does require that there is public notice provided. In the past, it's been to properties within 300 feet. Again, recent changes have dropped that number now to 100 feet. So some of this is happening in the larger climate of bigger state changes. So just to say a little bit more about the variance, and I've included images of a couple of the cottages that would be facing, in this case, the appellant's property. So kind of what will feel like the rear of those, as opposed to the kind of where they face the common area. So we did approve this variance because we felt that it met the approval criteria. We considered the comments that were received. There was obviously a lot of concern and frustration with the level and scale of development. This development type is obviously represents a large increase in density. There's no arguing that, and that, for better or worse, fits in with kind of what the intent of some of the state level changes are to provide more housing options, and it does result in some increased density in the neighborhoods. I think that again, understanding all those concerns, we were still focused on the question of does the variance, does the reduction in the setback present a significant impact that couldn't otherwise be mitigated? And we did not feel that was the case. So that was why the variance was approved. The appellant has asserted that, as required to make an appeal, that has asserted that there was an error in that decision. There was some error in terms of fact of the law. Our assessment, and it's discussed a little bit in the staff report, and there are some copies in the back, is that's not the case. We understand there's been, a lot of presentation of concerns about increases in traffic, challenges to parking, the increase in density, all things that we understand are coming with, these different types of housing. But in terms of the approval of the variance and the impacts of the reduced setback, that there was no error with respect to the original decision. And obviously we're here tonight to get a chance to discuss that. We'll get a chance to hear from the applicant, the appellant as well, and then other folks on both sides. We did address some of the concerns we heard about privacy, however limited, the condition that we imposed. It was to require a 6-foot fence around the perimeter of the development. That is the maximum height that's allowed without another variance for fences in residential zones. So that may have been the developer's intent anyway, to provide a fence, but we guaranteed that it would be there with the condition. And again, that's an example of what we're able to do when we do keep these variances going through our process. So in terms of the, it's just a rehashing of the approval criteria, what we were looking at and wrote our findings on. This is the approval criteria for the original variance. We're considering these things about detrimental impacts to surrounding properties. And this is, again, as a result of the reduced setback, not the overall housing type. Where criterion number 4 came in, impacts being mitigated to the extent practical, that's where we imposed the condition related to the requirement of the fence. So I'll wrap up for now and just kind of restate the options that the commission has tonight. We'll try to, let's see, keep it clear in terms, we have an original variance decision that was approved and has been appealed. So the one option is for the commission to deny the appeal request and uphold the initial decision. Another option is to approve the appeal in the sense that you thought there was some initial, some error in terms of the original decision. If you feel like you can make some adjusted modifications to the findings so that the original variance is still approvable, then that would be your action, is to approve the appeal, but to basically also approve the variance with some modified findings and or modified condition. Another option is to approve the appeal and find that the initial decision was an error, that there was some matter of fact or law, and then therefore we'd ask for some guidance about providing some findings to deny the original variance. Or we do have a little bit of time left on our 120-day clock. It expires on September 15th. If you decide, based on what you hear tonight, you need additional information or time to return to it, we can look at the opportunity to do that. So with that, I'll ask if you have any questions about the staff report at this point.
Are there any clarifying questions for staff? Have we received any correspondence? Or first of all, thank you, Brett, for that presentation. I do appreciate that information. Have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the meeting packet? And I do know we also have the additional item that was.
We did. That was the one thing I was going to say, is that, about 2 hours ago, right, we got additional comment from another property owner in the area, Carl Rainhold, sent an email. I distributed copies to the Planning Commission. I have some copies that are available for folks here. I'll set out and let you all distribute them if you want to see. You raised several concerns about what he identified as what he thought was an error in terms of the original decision. We don't think that they're accurate, but that's the basis of this.
Thank you. Would the applicant or their representative like to comment?
Through the chair, the applicant, Alec Shaw, is available over Zoom. Alec, I'm going to promote you to panelist so that you can make your presentation. Okay, Alec, you are promoted to panelist. You may proceed. Alec, you're muted. You'll need to unmute to testify.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. One second. Okay. Yeah, just following up basically what Brett said. I think there's a kind of a little bit of confusion for people, for the public on these type 2 variances. Can you guys hear me okay? The video seems really delayed. I just want to make sure.
Yes, we can hear you in the room.
Okay, great. I think there's a little bit of confusion with these type 2 variances for the public. It kind of seems like there would be more discretion for the staff.
Alex, sorry, could you just hold on 1 second? We just want to get the volume up in the room for you, for the folks that are here. So just give me 1 second.
Sounds good.
Alec, could I just ask you to speak up just a little bit so that we can hear
Oh,
you
yeah.
here in the room?
Yeah, this is pretty good, or?
As loud as you can, thank you.
Okay, okay, I'm talking pretty loud in my house, I promise, but I will try. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of confusion for the general public on these type 2 variances. That makes it seem like there's more discretion for the staff to decide, yay or nay, when really the planning manager's hands are pretty much tied on these type 2 decisions. They approve all of them. I don't think I've seen them deny one, maybe a few years ago or something, but I haven't seen any been denied recently. The person that appealed is more so upset about just the development as a whole, I think, than the variance. They just clammed on anything they could appeal. I don't really think there's anything worthwhile in the appeal. I don't think it's, nothing, it's not going to go anywhere. And I hope we can just wrap it up quickly. Looks like we've got a lot of people that want to talk, so I'm not so sure that's going to be the case, but that's all I got. Thanks. I don't know if I need to do something on my end, but I'll just wait.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Please.
Thanks for tuning in. Ooh, very loud in here. Thanks for tuning in and sharing some of your perspective. I appreciate that. I think one of the things I was kind of curious to hear more about from the development was whether you considered other kind of setback distances rather than just the kind of full 40%.
Yeah. I would have preferred to do a 5-foot setback. I think that's actually what I started at, but we ran into a little bit of issues with the courtyard minimum standard, and so I applied for the variance to mitigate that. And really with these developments, if I went back to the drawing board and said I could do this or that, there's a million things you can do on any property now. But in this case, I'm just trying to start my project. It's already been super delayed by this appeal. And it's super frustrating on my end. And I guess another thing is, I'm just utilizing the tools that the governor and the lawmakers are putting out there for builders. I'm not like, doing anything crazy. I'm literally just doing basically what I'm supposed to do as a builder right now, which is make really cheap, small housing and cram as much as it in as small of an area as possible. That's what the state wants, and I'm just doing that. It benefits me and it benefits the state, and it makes the neighbors mad though. So there's that. But
Great, thanks.
Any additional questions from commissioners? All right. Is anyone present, either in person or online, who would like to provide testimony in support of the applicant? In support of the applicant who just spoke. Okay. All right. Would the appellant or the representative like to present its appeal? Okay. And for the record, please just state your full name and city of residence.
Hello, My name is Amanda Cartwright. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for all being here. This means a lot to me and my neighborhood to allow this appeal. Yeah, my name is Amanda Cartwright. This is my husband, Doton Barr. We live at 2930 Southeast Balfour Street, adjacent to the property that Mr. Alex Shaw is going to be making this development. I disagree with what he just said, that I am against the whole development. I would like to start by saying that I disagree with that completely. I am in opposition to this variance request of a setback from 5 feet to 3 feet, because I don't feel like the mitigation tactics were really appropriate. I'm going to read here. I just wanted to start with that because I don't agree with that. All right. This is my formal testimony and appeal of the approved type 2 variance request titled VR 2026-008. This request, as well as we all have already heard, grants allowance for the side yard setbacks of units 5, 6, and 7 to be pushed from 5 feet to 3 feet. As an aggrieved party withstanding under city rules, I request the Planning Commission overturn the planning manager's initial administrative approval. I oppose the reduction of the side yard setbacks for unit 5, 6, and 7. I believe the applicant has failed to meet criteria required by Milwaukie Municipal Code in the following ways. Number one, failure to mitigate impacts and prevent unreasonable harm in regards to fire safety and structural proximity. Encroaching into the side yard setback drastically reduces the defensible space between the units and the neighboring property line. This introduces heightened fire spread risks to existing established homes that was not an issue before granting this variance. Also, by adding 5 to 6 new units, just by nature is increasing fire risk. I'd like to note I walked by and through one of Mr. Shaw's developments in the Hector Campbell neighborhood and saw no visible entrance strategy in case of a fire emergency. In regards to loss of privacy, light, and air. Pushing the building footprint of these separate units into the setback creates an oppressive, walled-off effect that chokes out natural light, airflow, and basic residential privacy for longstanding neighbors. All of our 4 bedrooms in our home are directly against this fence line, and the approval of this variance will most definitely jeopardize our privacy and result in a lot of much lack of natural light that we currently have. The only mitigation tactics I noticed or were made aware of were for the approved 6-foot fence to be built, which I do believe, and I know you already spoke to this, Brett, but that the developer would need to do that anyway. It was recommended to me that maybe we ask for a taller fence, and I think that I actually spoke with Brett via email about this, and I don't know that that's really necessary, nor would it really be that helpful. Yeah. And also, I believe that there was a requirement to add a sidewalk in the front of 2918 to also as another mitigation tactic for allowing this variance. The other way, I believe that, sorry, I'm losing my way a little bit. Give me just a moment. That the applicant has failed to meet the approval criteria is absence of legitimate physical site hardship. A variance is intended to solve unique site-specific physical constraints, not to maximize a developer's profit margin at the expense of the adjacent homeowners. The lot at 2918 is a standard configuration that is fully capable of accommodating middle housing or cottage cluster configuration without breaking standard setback boundaries. I would like to maintain that in no way am I against the introduction of cottage cluster developments in our neighborhood, nor am I against the growth of our neighborhood, increasing density in our neighborhood. Nor am I against, I am all for affordable housing, even low-income housing, if that was something that was actually being presented. Or that I believe Alex Shaw is ready to provide the neighborhood. I do think that there's a currently planned out method by our city council to do that more strategically than a developer requesting setback variances at most of his properties to maximize profit. Mr. Shaw failed to prove an unnecessary hardship for his cottage cluster development that would necessitate for the already mandated 5-foot side yard setback to be reduced by 2 feet on both sides. This is shown in his application materials for the variance request. It is stated that unit 5 would be omitted if the variance request is not approved. This would still allow for the building of 5 entire single-family units on one lot while leaving green space for those who will purchase or rent these units. I understand how important a yard or green space is. I have 3 small children at home. So I would hope that whoever is coming in to buy or rent these units would want that as well. The hardship here is entirely self-imposed by Mr. Shaw. The applicant is attempting to overbuild the site with a 6-unit layout that doesn't fit within the parameters of the underlying zone. So he's requesting a variance. The desire to squeeze higher density configurations onto the lot should not constitute legal justifications to push the side yards closer. But as he just stated in his testimony, he just wants to cram them all in there, right? Just like the state says. There's no unnecessary hardship on Mr. Shaw if his development does not receive this variance. If this variance approval remains, the adjacent neighbors in our neighborhood will be the ones to take this unnecessary hardship on this one. True, Mr. Shaw may take a loss in profit if he needs to meet the minimum requirements our city put into place for good reason by building 5 units and not 6. My earnest belief is that he will make that loss up somewhere else, like in many of his other developments that have been allowed in the city already. Shouldn't a developer from West Lynn who is buying up properties and applying for these precise setback variances on multiple projects inside Milwaukie to maximize profits under the guise of providing affordable ways to increase density be satisfied without needing to push even further for his profits? I'll say there is no loss to Mr. Shaw by something that has not yet even been built. Which I will also say that he is saying this pushes him back so far on his project, which aren't we within the September 15th limit here that we already saw up on the screen? So also, the other way I believe he's not meeting criteria is that this variance alters the visual character and fabric of our neighborhood. Take a look at the map. We don't have it up anymore, but we did earlier. Our neighborhood is one after another single-family home with space behind to breathe, to play, to enjoy. The closest multi-unit is up on 32nd, where there are 4 units laid out next to each other with parking for each unit on site. And since the units that Alex Shaw intends to build on the other side of our fence will not have any parking provided, this will undoubtedly cause congestion up and down Balfour, which raises the risk of harm exponentially to any one of the 18 children that currently reside within our 1.5 block radius. Not to mention, there are no sidewalks on our street, and there is no parking plan provided for any of the units that I was aware of. Going in at 2918, which means cars will soon be lining the streets where people are meant to be walking, or biking, which also increases likelihood of harm, which worries me a lot, raising my 3 children on this street. Excuse me, can I get a drink of water? This last piece is even a little bit more personal. Formal objection to procedural intimidation and coercion. Finally, I wish to place a formal statement into the public record regarding the applicant's conduct during this type 2 variance process. Upon exercising my legally protected right to participate in Milwaukee's land use process, the developer targeted me and my husband and our small business with hostile retaliatory threats. While I understand the Planning Commission evaluates structural criteria, a public land use process relies entirely on transparency, public safety, and free citizen participation. An applicant whose active intimidation tactics to suppress should not be rewarded with discretionary code variances. Mr. Shaw, 1 week after I applied, paid for, and followed all necessary city channels to go forward with this appeal, came to me with a personal text message threatening financial loss and security for the delay that this would cause his project. The day after that, he was bullying me into dropping my appeal. And I have copies of the text message here. I'm sorry, I didn't know how many people were gonna be here. I only brought 4 copies, but I'm happy to make some more if anybody would like them. In just a moment. So here is, these are copies of the text, just one text message that he sent to me. And the next day, there's this as well. If I can hand this to you and I'll tell you what it is. Thank you, Brett. I don't know if I should read this out loud. I guess I could.
Depends on how much time.
Okay. How much time do I have?
Generally allotted 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm only, I don't know how much time I have left. So he sent this personal.
For the record, I have not been keeping track of the time.
Oh, no, me neither. Okay, so yes, he sent a very threatening email, or text message to me, threatening me into dropping I encourage you carefully to consider whether continuing this appeal is in your best interest. You have a choice. You can continue with the appeal, in which case the project will proceed once the appeal is denied. And I will pursue any legal remedies that may be available to recover the damages caused by the delay. I'm not going to take the time to read through this entire thing, but yes, I received that on my personal phone. I immediately sent it straight to Brett because it felt very threatening to me. I did not expect to hear from this developer at all when I was following the city channels to submit this appeal. The next day, when he didn't hear from me because I was not going to respond, my husband Dotan got the same text message to his phone. And then later that day received the same message to his work email. We own and run a small business out of our home. It's a garage door business. Yeah, that was, I would say, bullying, threatening, and quite a bit traumatizing in the days to follow after that. I never expected to receive that sort of unexpected correspondence from this person. Come to find out, it's not the first time he's threatened people in our neighborhood. And some he's done that straight to their faces. So yeah, that's very worrying to me. We received the next week, and Brett's making copies of this as well, another bullying tactic from a law group that he retained this lawyer to also try to get us to drop our appeal. Yep. And we did not do that, clearly, because we are sitting here. If he wanted to talk to me about negotiating, he would need to come to me through the city, is how I felt about that. Because that's who I was going through to come to this point. This coercive behavior highlights a blatant disregard for the neighborhood. I believe this wholeheartedly. A blatant disregard for the neighborhood and the city's regulatory authority. Based on practices I have heard from other neighbors of Mr. Shaw's, other developments, and the city attorney themselves, no one seems to be a stranger to Mr. Alex Shaw's threats of lawsuit, bullying, and intimidation to get what he wants. Instead of being rewarded, maybe he should be blacklisted. Instead of listening to developers, maybe we should listen to the people living here next door and in our neighborhoods. In conclusion, I request that you all rethink the approval of the variance requested for units 5, 6, and 7, because Alex Shaw clearly had another plan if this wasn't approved, that I think could also be helpful to increase the density on Balfour and not have to push back the setbacks. Thank you so much for hearing what I had to say. I don't know if you'd like to.
I think Amanda put it really well, and I support everything she said. I'm just gonna say what I think the plan is for these developments. I think it's phase one. And I think the next phase for Alex Shaw and what I've seen from other developments is that there is a plan to, and I don't have evidence for that yet, but I think that that's coming later. The house in the front is not there to stay. And I think that that's part of the phasing of what he's doing. So that's the one thing I wanted to add. Of course, the intimidation, the bullying, obviously reaching out to our business is a line that's been crossed by this developer. That is, to me, a red line. And knowing on other projects that he has, how much pushback and how much violations is going on, and there is another aspect to this developer that we've learned that we probably never wanted to learn and never thought that we will, but it's there. And I just want to ask the committee to go back to reason is what I'm looking for. There is a way to do these projects without pushing the setbacks. There is a way to develop our city and add more affordable housing or medium housing without pushing on the neighbors, without pushing on people that are looking to have future in this city that might change if it's just going to be granted to the development, to the developers. And I think that there's got to be a reason to come back to see where we can do this without really exploiting, is what I'm trying to say. And that's, I think other than that, Amanda really put it well. And thank you very much.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to take just a couple moments to read this. And then I can ask if there's any commissioners who have any additional questions, but I want to make sure we get through this first before we ask that question. 100%. I think so, yeah. Yeah, yes. If you have something else you'd like to share, please.
Thank you.
I
One
was just
thing-
giving folks a moment to finish reading. And then, absolutely, we'll give you the opportunity in just a moment if folks are done reading. All right. If you have something you would like to add, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as a business owner, I've never had to use, I have a small size business and I've never had to use an attorney firm. And because of this threatening, basically, by Alex Shaw, I had to hire a firm to protect us against exactly what he was threatening to do, which is sue us for a lot of money. I just want to say that I want to protect or pass on somehow to protect other people in this community so they don't have to go through what we had to go through. Luckily, we had the means to be able to do some of that, obviously to the extent, but I just wanted to put that on the record. Once we hired somebody to protect us and they send a response to him, the threat has stopped. But I'm afraid that there are other people that are not going to be able to take the same steps. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Understood.
Thank you.
Do any commissioners have any questions for the appellants?
Got one question, Chair Graytrick. You indicated that maybe some other people you know have been treated similarly by Mr. Shaw. Are any of those people present personally this evening? Okay, great. Hopefully they'd be willing to testify as well. Thanks.
Well, this is where I ask if there's anybody else who's interested in speaking. I think I know the answer to that. We will first go through those speakers who are here in person to speak, and then we will go to those folks who are waiting online. So yes, you can now sit back. Thank you. And those folks who are called, please come, and similarly to previous speakers, list your full name and city of residence, which I know you live in Milwaukee. Okay, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and the relevant criteria, and to avoid repetition and information that is not relevant. Please state your name and city of residence for the records. They may be entered into the minutes. And we do ask that this testimony stage is approximately 3 minutes apiece. So please try to keep your remarks to that period of time. We'll start with, is it Katri Reinhold?
Thank you. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. That is rare. I have a solid data set around that. My name is Katri Reinhold. I am a community member. I live in Ardenwald, so yes, the city of Milwaukee. I'm coming here today in support of the appellant because I have concerns about density and how this will impact public safety. For background, I grew up on Balfour Street, and in my lifetime, I remember 2 significant house fires, and the most damaging one was the most pervasive one, was actually in the lot immediately to the west of the property that we're discussing today. As it happened, there was a party on the block that night, so there was more congestion, many cars on the street, and when the fire broke out, the rescue personnel had difficulty navigating down that hill in order to get to the scene of the fire. Ultimately, what happened was the best they could do was mitigate the damage to keep, in other words, to keep the fire from spreading to adjacent properties. And it was spooky. It was dramatic. It was the first time I'd ever seen a building absolutely burned down to cinders. And it helped me, it absolutely helped me, it shaped my perspective of the importance of things like city codes and why we should have, at the time, I didn't have variance in my vocabulary. I thought of it more of a buffer zone. And no matter what neighborhood I traveled through, whether it was Milwaukie, Selwood, somewhere in Portland, Eugene, it didn't matter. I noticed how buildings were placed intentionally on lots, and driveways and green spaces created that buffer zone to help protect all of the surrounding buildings. So in light of the density of all of these structures proposed for this project, I am in opposition for reducing that variance down to 3 feet. I have concerns about the proximity of those buildings next to each other, because as I said, even as a child, I understood how important it was to be able to have access to protect surrounding buildings. Today, I think that, again, going back to that fire, the footprint of the house that burned was approximately the same dimensions, the same footprint as the existing house that's on that property. So if that event were to repeat again, it would be dramatic. And I think it would not only affect everybody who lives on that lot, but definitely the neighbors surrounding. And again, if there isn't on-site parking provided, as others have mentioned, there's going to be an overflow of other cars that will be lining up and down Balfour Street. As it is, sometimes, we get some congestion because of, people have contractors over to help them, or they have a party or whatnot. And I have no grievance with that. But I do have some significant concerns about how this project can impact public safety. And again, not to rehash the points that have been so eloquently made before, I'd like to thank everybody for their time. Thank you, Brett, for explaining all of those documents in the packet and reviewing the layout of the lot so that we could more accurately visualize what we're talking about today. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Abigail Britton.
Hi, my name's Abigail Britton. I am a resident of the Ardenwald neighborhood in Milwaukie. Thanks for hearing me. I just want to say first that neighbors should be safe to participate in this civic process without the fear of lawsuits and threats. I think that is important. I also would like to share that setbacks exist for a reason. If there was no purpose for a setback, we would build directly up to property lines. They exist for safety, for a fire break to prevent easy spread between neighboring houses, space for maintenance to occur, space for proper water drainage and for privacy, and also for aesthetics. The current requirement for setbacks is 5 feet. Previously, this was 10 feet. Senate Bill 1537, Section 38(4)A specifies that a city must allow for a 10% reduction in setback distance for side setbacks. That's the automatic mandatory adjustment. Mr. Shaw is requesting a 40% adjustment. The city is not obligated to approve a 40% adjustment, contrary to what he thinks. It does seem like you're required to approve a 10% adjustment. That would be a 4.5 foot setback, not a 3 foot setback. If a variance must be approved, 4.5 feet sounds better than 3 feet and meets what the state has already outlined as the mandatory adjustment. This difference will not provide a hardship to the landowner. He has at least 3 alternatives that have been documented either in his own documents or by the planning team. So he could remove an existing rear deck on the existing structure. He could make the units smaller. He could reduce the number of units by 1. He writes that the setback is needed for a compliant and functional courtyard layout. He has other options to make it both compliant and functional. I'd like to emphasize the functional part of the courtyard. I've yet to see a functional courtyard built in any of the cottage clusters in my neighborhood. SB 1537 says, and I hope Mr. Shaw will listen to this because he seems to be a little bit confused on this point, but each cottage cluster must share a common courtyard in order to provide a sense of openness and community for residents. The common courtyard shall be developed with a mix of landscaping, lawn area, pedestrian paths, and/or paved courtyard areas, and may also include recreational amenities. I would love to see a lawn in a cottage cluster. I would love to see a recreational amenity. That is not happening. We're already allowing developers to build the worst version of cottage clusters that they could imagine, where, as you heard from him himself, they are cramming in as many units as they possibly can without any thought to the community that could be built there. And we don't need to go beyond what the state is already allowing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Paul Britton.
Thank you for having me. My name is Paul Britton. I also live in the Ardenwald neighborhood. And I was recently made aware of Mr. Shaw's newest development. And all I have from my experience is the development that he has been working on my street, which is Olson Street. And it just, to me, it seems like all, and he is a developer and it's his right, but he is cramming as many units as he can into a space that may not be able to fill it. With the variances that he's asking for on Balfour, why not just make one less unit? Or why not just make, why ask for a variance when you could just build less? But when he zoomed in tonight, my impression is that he did not care about the community or the people that live in Milwaukie, are on my street, which the development that I'm most aware of is the 9-unit development, which will dramatically change the how the neighborhood, how the street functions, how many cars are there. The density will be increased dramatically. And so I'm here tonight to just bring another voice into this, which should be a conversation, but to Mr. Shaw, it seems like he's just gonna tell us what he's gonna do, and that's the end of it. But he doesn't live in Milwaukie. He's just, in my opinion, he's using Milwaukie as a way to develop and make the most amount of money as he possibly can. And so I don't think you should allow any kind of variance, and I think he should reduce his project to safely build 3 to 4 units. That's, you also get density from 3 to 4 units. You don't have to build 6. And that's what I would like to share, is that my impression is that he is just trying to make the most amount of money in he lives in West Lynn. He doesn't live in Milwaukie. So how can I make the most amount of money as I possibly can and then take my riches back to West Lynn? And that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Bob Harrison.
So my name is Bob Harrison. You may remember me. I came up before you probably 3 months ago, and I was complaining about the development on Olson Street, which Matt was just talking about, and I presented to you the fact that there was a dogwood that was taken down, a 50-year-old dogwood. This being Milwaukie, the dogwood city, you know, I got kind of blown off on that. Well, you know, the tree wasn't going to live. So that's my first little complaint about the tree. They took off, I think 70% of the foliage. Now we're down to 10%. So the whole idea, the whole thrust of this, of increase in density to me, is a stupid idea. This idea of cottage cluster to me is a bizarre term. When you think of a cottage, you're not thinking of those kind of buildings. Those buildings are an abomination. I live across the street, almost directly across the street from this guy's project, and I've got nothing against this guy personally, but I walk back there at night, and the buildings back there are crammed together. You know, it is like a little ghetto area that what you guys are creating, you know, and I see the same thing happening in Walford. Increased density, increased profitability, eliminate community, you know, pack them in there. It's just, it's a very bad idea. So I would say I'm not in favor of any kind of increase. And I also want to tell you, I'm deaf, which means that I have to try to pick up what you all are talking about. I really wish you had the technology to put down in words so I could follow what is being said here. I don't know if you're going to do it or not, but and also the last thing I want to say is our neighborhood, Ardenwald, we're older, it's an older established neighborhood with large yards, and we are getting the increase of density in that neighborhood, and that neighborhood's being changed. And all that property, all those houses, all those people that are moving in there, all have at least one car, if not two. They're all going to be funneling out Johnson Creek. It's going to increase more and more chaos. And, you know, we're trying to have livability. This isn't it. This is a very, very bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Alejandra Pena.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Alejandra Pena. I have a duplex on Olson adjacent to his other property, and we're 6 to 9 months into this experience. So when we heard there was an opportunity to comment here about the Bore 4 project, much like one of my neighbors who are present, wanted to take the opportunity to talk. So at first, I just want to recognize that I'm in agreement with a lot of the previous commenters who've done the hard work of looking at the code, making sure that the argument is grounded in the policies that's been implemented. I did not do that work, so I appreciate everyone who did that. And I wanted, the new thing I have to offer is that the idea of this is affordable housing requires that these units be sold at a price that's affordable and then also be resellable. And I don't see that for these units, and I don't think there's a lot of evidence that that's true for other projects that are currently in place. So for a small family to buy, let's say they're $300,000, I have no idea what he's pricing them out, at a 7%, 6% interest rate, they have a sizable financial commitment to this place. But they're using the American dream. They're building equity in a home. However, if they can't resell the property because there's no value, because the experience of living there is terrible, there's no parking, there's no space, there's no bike rack, like there's no garage. Plenty of apartment developments all over have garage spaces as well. I just don't think that that does a service to our affordable housing community. We had another cottage cluster go down in the Olson and 42nd area. And it seemed like it went back to the bank and it got resold. They lowered it to a price, but when are we going to see those back on the market in a way that supports the people who bought them? So that's what I have to add in addition to what has also been said, and I appreciate the time to talk.
Thank you. We will hear from Jonas Steinbrink.
We appreciate the municipality's decision to have these appeals. In the variance request, section 19.911.1, the first sentence reads, variances provide relief from specific code provisions that may unintentionally prevent reasonable development or impose undue hardship. These local variances, we understand, are driven by the 2024 Oregon State Bill 1537 to address statewide housing shortages by easing density, height, and setback restrictions, and allows for expedited urban growth boundary expansions. While there may be a housing shortage in Oregon as a whole, Ardenwald neighborhood is not showing a significant increase in population. U.S. Census 2010 to 2020 data shows that a 110 person per square mile growth in this neighborhood. Worth noting is that data doesn't show or take into account the declining growth from 2020 to 2023 experienced statewide. Also stated in these surveys, socioeconomic indicators section is a mere 1% of households showing as severely crowded. The developer's response to previously stated section 19.911.1 is, quote, similar setback reductions have frequently been approved by the city of Milwaukie and would not have any significant impact on public health, safety, or welfare, end of quote. However, in 2024, the first phase of the Hillside Park redevelopment plan had not been completed, recently opening 200 additional homes, respectively, to the neighborhood, with an additional 300, respectively, coming in the next couple of years. Due to these recent and upcoming neighborhood developments, we feel that our immediate area and Ardenwald neighborhood has been more than a healthy contributor to the 20-year plan of Oregon State Bill 1537, which will soon amount to over 500 home additions in our area over a 3-year span. With these facts, I argue that the requested setbacks for the discussed development do not currently meet the need for variance, considering to date community housing development environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll hear from Beth Bishop.
Hi, my name is Beth Bishop. I live in Milwaukie. Thank you. I actually live right across the street from where this development is proposed to be built. I don't want to say the same thing over and over again because you've all heard it, and I want you to know that I support what I've heard so far. And I'm not opposed to cottage clusters. What I am concerned about is public safety in that area. That street has no sidewalks. We have people that live on the street that are disabled, that have no way to move freely around, which is unfortunate. This adding 6 units will add, at the very least, probably 6 vehicles that have to be parked somewhere. And I think that Katri's statement about her experience as a young person with a fire is something that this committee cannot ignore. That you need, this is about livability and safety. Are people going to be comfortable? This is a neighborhood that's upset and needs to be heard. And so I've said I said that I support what other people have said. One thing I did want to really talk about just briefly is I find Mr. Shaw's statements and bullying tactics towards Amanda and Dotan as reprehensible. In this day and age, it seems to be the common thing that happens, to threaten a lawsuit when they are well within their rights of what they can and can't do within the timeframes is deeply offensive. And it's unfortunate that he's taken that tactic. It makes him seem like he's just trying to make money. He's not caring about any part of the neighborhood and the livability of the people who own homes and live there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Lisa Gunyon-Rinker.
Hello, my name is Lisa Gunyon-Rinker. I live at 3012 Southeast Balfour Street. And thank you very much for having this appeal process available to citizens. We really appreciate it. I need to pull it up. Okay. Anyway, so I have a little conflict of interest in it. I am the neighborhood land use chair for Ardenwald, and I live on Balfour Street. So I do have a conflict there. So I'm not using the neighborhood time for this discussion. But what I wanted to say with Brett's opening discussion about housing, Ardenwald has never denied any kind of development. We have apartments, we have fourplexes, we have threeplexes, we have condominiums, we have townhomes, we have duplexes, we have house shares. Ardenwald, as far as code goes, had always allowed that. The only thing we did not like or approve of was the more recent Olson development that proposed to blow right through the code we had just put in for our hub areas. That said, I do believe that Mr. Shaw feels he is entitled to have this variance request approved, and I do agree with Abby's statement that this is really a 40% increase instead of a 10%, which is the requirement. And I do think the difference we're arguing is 2 feet, which might seem like nothing, but if it comes to a fire or any kind of safety issues, it does make a difference. It gives you a little bit of time. The other thing I would like to say is that our neighborhood does have larger lots. We are seeing a lot of development right now, not only at Hillside, not only at Olson, not only on Harvey, and Olson again, and now on Balfour and on 29th. The cottage clusters were initially viewed as smaller homes that would be affordable for people to either buy. We can't make them. You had to purchase them. You could also have them as rentals, but the opportunity to build equity in a smaller home, but also have green space surrounding. All of the cottage clusters to date in our neighborhood have really no green space. There's no sizable trees. It's like we're creating a heat sink. We're building the maximum number of units, 15 on Harvey Street, however, 8 on the end of Olson. And again, those, like Abby said, they had to drop the price $100,000 on those to actually sell them, and then it went back to the bank. So now they're partially rentals, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, this is all concerning to neighbors and the neighborhood because it affects all the properties. When some of the properties start to fail, like the ones on Harvey where we were assured with a land trust, $250,000 would be affordable, we would get people in there, no problem. They're still not filled. And that is concerning because now we also have Hillside. We've got all the areas that are new apartments coming in there. They're not affordable. They're $1,700. A month. This isn't what the neighborhood had originally wanted when we were talking affordable housing. There's only one, the building C, that is the affordable housing. So there are lots of concerns that we have, and the neighbors here feel that this specific development on Balfour could be done without the variance request. Remember, the reason we're here is because there is a variance request. If there was just as it was built and no variance requested, we wouldn't even be here. There's no appeal. So I just want you to consider that thought. I know you're volunteers, and I appreciate your time, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. And we'll hear from Daniel Gonzalez.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I live in Ardenwald in Milwaukie, and I do live next door to another project by Alec. And I just wanted to point out, on the point of welfare, human welfare, these houses may be very small. They're some of the tallest houses in the neighborhood. So when you put them within 3 feet of a fence line, it does affect the neighbors as far as the amount of sunlight, especially in the winter. So not only is that an issue for mental health, but also the ability to grow trees and other plants, which affect human health. And I know the city has an interest in keeping tree cover, but I would like to point out that if we don't have sunlight on our property, we can't actually grow trees. And I'd also like to point out that you may be able to mandate someone plant a tree, but the local residents don't have any guarantee that the tree will be maintained or that it will actually grow into a full-sized tree before being denied water or other care. And so I'd like you to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Abby Titleman. If I'm saying that right, sorry.
Hi, thank you. I also live next to the development on Olson Street, and I want to first make a point towards the character of Milwaukie as just as a whole. I understand that we're going through a lot of growth and development, and change is scary, and we're all concerned. The dogwood tree that was cut down next to us is a symbol of Milwaukie. It was 50 years old when it was cut down, and it was left in a gnarled, is still left in a gnarled mess in the front yard of that development, and has led to emotional and environmental trauma for the neighborhood and the neighbors that walk by it every day and see it as a wreckage and as a testament to this man's lack of care of our neighborhood that he does not live in. Also, he is building within 3 feet of our property we live at 3526. I don't know if he applied for a variance for that, but I just want to make that point. The buildings, like Daniel pointed out, are extremely tall, and that's really intense when you're living right next to it. There's no sunlight. There's 9 units in that backyard. You'd think, 9 units is enough. I have heard, and this is not something that I know for certain, that there could be plans in the future to knock down the house that's in front. And if that happens, that would be yet another trauma to the neighborhood and would decrease the general character of Milwaukie. It is a beautiful yellow house that's been, was lived in by our neighbor Ann, who died there at 94 years old. She raised her kids there. If that same thing happens to the property that's in question, the house gets knocked down, it would affect the general character. And so I just want you to be aware, if that comes across your desk as an option, this person, Alec, wants to knock down these houses that he said he was going to keep, you really need to consider how that's going to affect the neighborhood and how that's going to affect the neighbors and the public perception of Milwaukie, which is a beautiful place to live, and I'm proud to live here. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Dylan Cruz.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. For the record, my name is Dylan Cruz. I live up on King Road, next to one of the other developments that Mr. Shaw is bringing forward tonight. I'm testifying tonight in support of the appellants and in opposition to this variance request, and appreciate the opportunity to engage with you all here. I want to give a few comments on the variance request itself. Commissioner Sherman, I don't know if you got a satisfactory response to your question about other options, and I think it's pretty indicative of the business practices that this guy employs. He's failed to demonstrate genuine hardship or prevention of reasonable development. He can still build multiple middle housing units that meet new local and state density goals and the requirements without this variance. The requested setback variance causes light and flow impacts, reduced privacy, safety concerns, reduced access for firefighters, poor ADA compliance, and detrimental impacts on adjacent property and neighborhood characteristics, qualities, and aesthetics that aren't mitigated. Come up to the project on Harrison and take a look at what they've done over there, and you'll get a good indication where this is headed. The variance request is self-created and financial due to the developer's design requirements and desired profit margins, not the physical characteristics of the lot. And he's basically said as much, right? So a few other issues that I want to add here. It's not a single isolated variance request. It's a trend. And this is what we're seeing on all of his projects right now. What he does is he makes the same variance setback requests on this project and 2 other developments in the city. He's done it, like I said, at Harrison. We have 18 units there that he's built, and he's asking for these variances in a staged process. So he has this history of manipulating developments where he subdivides and stacks variance requests over time. So what he does is he purchases multiple adjacent properties on these blocks. He goes house to house and says, can I buy your house? Can I buy your house? Can I buy your house? Buys out multiple blocks, and then he phases this, and he does subdivisions over time and then asks for individual variances, right? So in isolation, it looks reasonable, but it's deliberate and planned as part of this. And he does this over several months in a multi-year process. So the city really needs to account for these cumulative impacts of these developments. In isolation, like I said, a single unit or 2 seems reasonable, but when you have dozens of units being built adjacent together, it fundamentally changes the characteristics of the neighborhood, right? And moves us away from this balance. This extends well beyond the intended goals of state legislation to increase density, and it fails to achieve the reasonable balance for existing neighborhood characteristics and quality of life, which is also part of that legislation and the intent of what our leadership is trying to do at the state level. I want to speak to his behavior as well because I've experienced it, right? This guy has an extensive history of poor performance and intimidation to achieve his goals. This includes multiple documented and fined state labor violations. He's almost lost his labor license. Safety violations, fined thousands of dollars on our project. Garbage violations, fined thousands of dollars on this project. And extraordinary measures to advance his developments and silence critics. Okay, he's failed to follow a reasonable and ethical public engagement process. He's threatened lawsuits against individuals. This dude came to my house. All right, because I had a problem with his project. He had contractors invite neighbors over to come take wood off the property from the massive trees that he cut. I did that. I went over and took that. A few days later, he comes to my house and starts chewing me out, talking about how we're gonna have a problem if this happens again, that I'm trespassing, that I shouldn't do that. I said, talk to your guys. And then he said, well, I'm gonna be buying all this stuff up. I'll be back. You'll be seeing a lot more of me around here. A couple weeks later, he's driving by in his truck by his development. I'm walking my dog. And he goes, hey, maybe I'll stop by your place later. Come over to your property, check stuff out again. Okay? I don't take kindly to it. He hasn't come by back again since then. He's welcome to. But, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with here. You shouldn't be enabling this type of behavior. It's so egregious and gross that he's engaging in this type of stuff to get his stuff rammed through. It's an absolute embarrassment in terms of the process that we've laid out here and completely legal and ethical responsibilities that people have to create a fair and democratic process. So I'd like to take a minute to just see all of these recently passed state bills achieve their intended goals. Like, let's take a breath here. This is a poorly designed project requesting extracurricular variances. We should pause. We should require that this guy adhere to the already generous allowances that are being provided to him in statute and regulations. And I think the Planning Commission has an obligation to achieve this balance and to recognize very reasonable appeals of the neighbors and the people sitting behind me tonight. All right, not just the developers like this guy who have no interest in the future of this community and have made it very, very clear in their public statements in front of you all. So I urge you to reject this variance request. I cannot think of a worse person to enable any further in our communities. And you should reject other pending and future requests from him as well. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you all. Can we now hear from those folks who are waiting online?
Okay, we do have some folks online. If you would just use the raise your hand function. Chris Costello, I see that you have your hand raised. I'm going to give you the ability to speak. Yep, and I see other folks' hands going up, so terrific. Chris Costello, you just need to unmute and you should be able to testify now. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
You're a little faint. If you could speak up, please.
Okay, sorry, I'm on a cell phone. My name is Chris Costello. I'm at the beach right now. Otherwise, I'd be there in person. I wasn't sure I'd make it in time, and I didn't want to miss this meeting. I am the husband of Anna Costello. We live at 9906 Southeast 29th Avenue, which is on the other side of this development. And we would never have known about this unless this mailing for the variance had come to our mail.
I have a couple issues we've had. Amanda and her husband are, it covers a lot of very valuable input about how safety and whatnot. I've got a 10-year-old daughter who is confined to a wheelchair. Sorry, not 10-year-old, 7-year-old. I have another daughter who's 10, but I have a 7-year-old daughter who's confined to a wheelchair. Her bedroom is on the side of our house facing the fence in the general area where that particular variance will be. My concerns are whether or not I can get her out of the house if there was a fire in the middle of the night. Get that close to the fence and the tree that's there, how fast they spread my manufacturing, and they burn very fast. My other concern I have is that there's a parking area, there's a lot of kids riding bikes and playing. There's hillside development. I already know that when it's developed, we're going to see increased foot and vehicle traffic from that development on our street. There's not enough parking for the residents there. And the fact that there's no parking whatsoever for this development really concerns me. I pay money to connect to the city to travel the roadways. I have a place to park my vehicle. And my concern is that what's going to happen with this development and possibility of 6 or more cars on our street with no assigned parking space. Lastly, I think that if you come to the neighborhood and say, hey, I'm looking to develop this property, I personally have no problem with 3 single-story units on the property, and with a 6-foot fence, it would feel and fit into the neighborhood just fine. But these 22 plus tall buildings, very tall and narrow, they all the other things that people have spoken, they're just not attractive to the neighborhood, they don't fit in, and they increase the density, and then of course the fire risk, I worry with my daughter. I feel Alex Shaw, in his testimony tonight, is very arrogant. I agree with everybody that he seems to feel like he owes it, and I really doing this to maximize profit, and not care about the neighborhood, and Milwaukie, and how we fit in, because I live in Portland, Oregon, Milwaukie. I love the Milwaukie feel. I love the neighborhood is, and the fact that we don't get along, especially in our neighborhood, no matter what our views are on something, we all get along. So the fact that this situation, I don't think anyone has any want or need to be helpful, or I watch out for my neighbors. I can tell you right now, as a first responder, I do not feel I would do the same courtesy to this development because it's impacting my neighborhood and me personally and my daughter, my wife and kids. So that is my testimony. I appreciate you guys taking the time and allowing us to at least do this in the great democracy we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Now, Jade, I'm going to allow you to talk. You just need to, I'm sorry. Yes. Jade, go ahead.
Hi there, you can't hear me, just wave your hands. Online, and I'm going to thank my neighbors who came to speak tonight, and I want to just reiterate some of the points they voiced about the concerns about this cottage cluster during the offer. On paper, these cottage clusters seem like they would be a good idea, but the ones I've seen built and hearing from my neighbors, they must agree, they don't live up to the standard that the city has. They cost too much. Obviously built with little consideration about the impacts on the community who's here, and with seemingly little intention to support any community once built. I'm wondering how the oversight is actually being done on this project once they are approved. If anyone is checking to make sure they live up to the original goals of the cottage clusters. Why are we allowing developers to share any good following the project? Our community is losing green space. I would like to repeat what my neighbors on Olson have said about that beautiful driveway from Olson. We cut down and we left in pieces for months now. It was also cut down ironically during Milwaukee job listing. So I think that definitely shows you how little the developer cares about our city and our neighborhood. We are dealing with safety. Those points regarding fires and crowded, narrow streets. I live on my street before the development. It is narrow and hard to hit further out there, not only is it narrow a little bit. And we're losing our character. I have people come visit from Portland, from all over, and let me know about Milwaukie and our neighborhood the trees, the greenery, the space, how it feels like it's been there for a long time, and where we've been at with this. I really implore you all to please take a step to stop this and help us maintain our community for years to come. It's my opinion that this variance should not be allowed. Considering this property to be better developed, to support our community and our Milwaukee values. And I really encourage you to deny this and any other that Mr. Dobbins do, because it really does seem like there is a pattern with the developments and this behavior. Please, if you haven't, go visit these developments on Olson, on Harrison, anyone in Greenville, and see and have results. And please stop it before it's too late and we need to do more people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jade. And then I have Carl Reinhold. You can go ahead. Just speak up, please. Thank you.
Carl Reinhold, Milwaukie, Oregon. I have lived on Balfour and adjacent for 56 years. I am here in support of the house. As a retired principal solutions architect, I am quite familiar with blueprints, diagrams, accuracy, and details. For example, the W up behind you has a 1/4 character excessive furnace space on the left side compared to the other for this, and you will never be able to unsee that again. I'm sorry, and you're welcome. In the variance application, page 22, unit 5, the blueprint is inaccurate. The front and rear elevations must be a mirror of one another in an orthographic projection. That's the way blueprints work. Front and rear are a reverse in the aspect ratio and process. Therefore, this blueprint misrepresents the building plan. Page 24, unit 6, likewise, has front and rear elevations do not mirror each other. This represents what will be built there. It tries to indicate that there's more of an angle to the sunlight to get to the house next to it. So this is misrepresenting the impact on the adjoining properties. An 8-foot total distance with that variance, with an 8-foot roof next door at 2930, according to Mr. Pythagoras, means a 45-degree angle to the upper story of the adjoining house from the roof line. And 15 feet on the new buildings, the children at 2930 will never be able to see the sunlight from their bedrooms ever again. While these concerns were seemingly but respectfully dismissed at the beginning of the meeting as inaccurate, I'm hoping that I have successfully rebutted that reputation and asked, can we be confident that the designs as submitted are actually otherwise faithful and will be followed during construction? Additionally, the applicant entity is purportedly an experienced developer. As such, the assertion that the setback requirement was a surprise suggests at best a disingenuous representation, and I would implore the commission to consider and scrutinize to ensure that representation and ensure that no other apparent deception may have been involved in the variance application or the application itself. Lastly, I would like to express indignation on your behalf at the assertion that you have no agency and just have to do what the developer has told you to do. I think that undermines your individual agency, your collective agency that does not represent the empowerment that your commission has and that you have been doing. There's a difference between a privilege and a right. Developers have a privilege to develop in our city, and privileges come with responsibilities. We are asking you to ensure that those responsibilities are honored and that our property rights and communities are protected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
There are a few other folks online, but I don't see any more raised hands.
Does anyone present either in person or online who would like to provide any legal testimony?
Thank you for your time tonight. My name's Richard Mason.
Turn on the microphone, just push the button.
Microphone, there we go. Hi. Thank you for your time tonight. My name's Richard Mason. I live on Olson Street as well. And when I heard about the new development on Balfour, I did have some concerns. I've been a 20-year first responder in this community. I have worked in residential construction. I am commercial carpenter now, and all right, I'm used to speaking in front of all kinds of people here, but I'm concerned about the environmental impacts. You know, water. You know, don't we have a strain on our water and our electricity, and we're building more in more places? I have concern about emergency services, fire. 3 feet is not enough room for, you know, someone to come around the side of a house and rescue someone. You know, not enough room for someone to do basic repairs on their homes. You know, I don't think that should be allowed. And I'm against allowing it. Thank you.
Does staff have any additional comments?
Yes, I made a few notes about things I'll try to respond to. One note is that, you know, all these structures are still subject to the requirements of the building code, which include address of fire and life safety standards. And so the allowance for a 3-foot setback is, you know, it is not independent of applicable building codes as well. So the questions about fire and life safety are addressed, I think, in other ways. To clarify some of there are some minimum requirements for cottage cluster development, including what I mentioned before about the minimum common area. And again, kind of in the regulatory framework, we are always happy to see people exceed the standards, but at the end of the day, we have to hold people to at least the minimal standards. And in this case, the development has chosen to do that, and is with the approved variance is providing the minimum common area. So again, I think I take all the points from people about, you know, wanting there to be more amenities or even better conditions. But at the end of the day, what we're holding people to is meeting the minimum standards. And with respect to the privacy concerns, I think we did find, and kind of again articulated this in the staff report, that it's hard to balance all of these things. I think there's concerns about access to light and air, with also privacy in general. The ground floor of the structures that are proposed don't have any windows. So in terms of direct ground floor to ground floor privacy issues, that was one of our considerations, as well as the fence. And to clarify that, I want to be clear that fencing is not required. I think what I said in my presentation was that we believe the developer was intending to probably propose a fence, but it's not a requirement. So that's why we thought it was important to include that as a condition. Also, speaking to this development, like other developments, when there is an increase in in the number of units, it often does trigger a requirement for a look at the frontage of the street. In this case, as everyone knows, Balfour is not a very improved street. There's no sidewalk, there's no curb. But this development is required, regardless of the variance, to provide some half-street improvements. In this case, there will be an additional curb, sidewalk, landscape strip, and some additional pavement. So that starts to build a little towards maybe an eventual improvement overall for Balfour. But I just want to be clear that the improvements or requirement for a sidewalk wasn't part of the variance. It's part of what's required for the constructing the new units. And then I guess the final clarification I'll make for now is, there have been some fair points made about some of the statements that the applicant made with respect to if the variance wasn't approved, I'd remove a unit or, increase the common area and considering alternatives and that kind of thing. And I think an important distinction to make is we do have two levels of variance. So the type 2 variance is addressing what I described before as almost mathematical adjustments, 40% to a side yard setback or 25% to a front or rear yard setback. And the idea is that those are, the numbers and the percentage of them are intended to indicate a relatively limited scope of change. That's what can be handled with a type 2 variance. The type 3 variance, which would come initially to the planning commission, is for something more than that. And that's where the requirement of the approval criteria gets into pushing an applicant to show that they've looked at some alternatives and considered alternatives. And so some of the concerns or suggestions that have been raised are appropriate, but more appropriate for a type 3 variance. They would be fair things to ask the applicant to show us why you couldn't do something different here, or show us what is extraordinary about this site. That is not the case for type 2 variances. It's just a different set of standards or a different burden of proof for the applicant. And then I think I just closed with saying what I don't think I said in my presentation, just to kind of reaffirm and clarify that the staff recommendation on this is to deny the appeal and to approve the original variance. We did not find that there was an error in terms of that.
The applicant may now present a rebuttal as desired in private remarks.
Okay, Alec, you have the ability to provide a rebuttal, so I'm going to give you the ability to talk. If you like, you are muted still, so if you would like to provide that rebuttal, you need to unmute yourself. Alec, I'm not sure if you're speaking, but we cannot hear you here in the room. Hold on, Alec, I'm going to try something else. I'm not sure why we can't hear it. Just a second. Okay, Alan, you've been promoted to the panelist. Give that a try.
Yeah, you guys hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Please speak up. Thank you.
Yeah. Just echoing what Brett said, there's no error in the finding, and I don't think any of the public comments have really touched on anything that could have been thought of as an error or some type of problem after the execution of the public opinion on not liking the content of yeah, my only request, I guess, is I would love to wrap this up tonight. It's great, and I think we need to leave this into another meeting, but I don't know whether it will. But that's all I know. Thank you very much.
Any commissioners have any questions for staff?
I'm hoping that you can expand on Senate Bill 1567. There was a section quoted regarding a 10% adjustment and not a 40% adjustment. can speak to that. So Senate Bill 1537 has a list of, as part of their required adjustments, or their mandatory adjustments, a list of the kinds of variances and the amounts. So in 1537, the mandatory adjustment is 10% to the side yard setback. The city's code in 911 type 2 variances allows for a side yard setback variance of up to 40%. So our code is 40%, the mandatory adjustments in 1537 are 10%.
And maybe just to follow on that, the up to 40% is not just, is that specific to cottage clusters or is that all sorts of zones?
Correct, yes, it's not specific to cottage clusters, it's a up to 40% adjustment to the side yard setback. It's not specific to the type of development.
Is that 40% adjustment consistently a type 2 variance? We advertise development that would be cottage clusters.
Correct.
And I guess rough statistically, how often, or do you have in recent memory a situation where one has not been approved?
I can't think of one, no. And we've actually denied a type 2 variance.
How common is the side yard variance? Do you have rough numbers over the past few years?
I would have to go back and check. We did submit a report on our 1537, but we didn't have to make it, is it a side yard, is it front yard, is this on, but I can take a quick look in our notes and see. So you can put a pin in that. I can look at some stuff while you're asking other questions.
Perhaps this is a question for Justin, but I just wanted to clarify, in the email that we were given with the elevations presented by Carl Reinhold, with the various elevations, the renderings of the project, where they were mislabeled, that's not going to present any, that's not going to jeopardize the project, I assume, given it was initially approved, something he considered a misrepresentation of the project, and since that would jeopardize approval.
We only received those at the late hour this afternoon prior to coming here for the hearing, but I checked in with Brett, and while the plan and drawings themselves there might be some issues that Mr. Randall pointed out in terms of projections and things like that on the piece of paper. I think the elevations that were indicated by the applicant will be the elevations that will be required to build to, with his building permits going through these various processes. So I think there were some other elements in that email where Mr. Randall might not fully understand how we apply certain areas of the code. And admittedly, it's complicated, but that's why we have professional planners. They're sitting in contingency.
Of course, some understanding of building permits and separate process.
Brett, you spoke to the fact that all fire safety requirements of the building code are being followed. And there's been multiple comments regarding the concern with this 3-foot setback.
Fantastic presentation.
In the documentation that all these materials were sent through, the original application was sent through the fire marshal. That's what, yeah, he said his copy. Have there been any concerns regarding fire safety, either with this development, or I would say with any recent developments where we have had properties where buildings are going to be, kind of this distance to have the 3-foot setback? Like, is that a concern with the fire marshal? Is it something they brought up?
Yeah, I guess I won't speak too much for the fire district. To answer the question, they haven't raised concerns with us. And when we're having pre-application conferences for projects in general, there's a reminder that there are options for an applicant in some cases if they're not meeting a certain distance, if they're too far back from a street or whatnot, there's always an option to put sprinklers, fire sprinklers in the units, for example, which adds some cost, but it's a choice that developers make sometimes if they can't, figure out the infrastructure in other ways. Or, again, I'm now speaking out about building, the building code also has options in terms of increasing fire rating walls and that kind of thing if certain distances can't be met. So there are ways to, the city's not allowing structures to be built that aren't meeting the applicable, fire and life safety codes, whatever options they may choose to.
Just wanted to confirm whether or not somebody, everybody from the fire marshal had actually said anything about having this. I don't see, another thing that was kind of brought up that, to be frank, wasn't really on my radar because I don't see it written where we have such authority over it, is this discussion of sunlight. Do we have any language within our code that requires a certain amount of sunlight or doesn't allow for a reduction of sunlight to a certain degree? I don't think that there is anything in the code about that.
No.
Through the chair, if I could, just to respond to Commissioner Hess's question. I was just looking at our spreadsheet and it looks like since 2023, I'm just speaking that as a date, including this variance, we had 5 applications for a side yard setback.
Thank you.
Could you clarify, I saw discussion that the fence could be made taller. Was there an interest from folks to have that fence taller?
Well, I want to be careful about speaking out of turn or misremembering, and maybe I'll glance at Amanda. I believe we did have an email discussion about that, noting that the max height for fences is 6 feet without another type of type 2 variance, which would allow it to be up to 8 feet. And my memory of the response, and I think she indicated in her testimony, was that was not necessarily a solution she thought would help.
What if we have a question? Ask a question.
So generally, once we
this is, the testimony phase is already concluded, and there's really not a back and forth between people providing testimony to the planning commission. So
It's just a question, though.
that's a back and forth. If you would ask them a question, they might not be able to answer it, or it's just not how the hearing progresses.
Okay.
any other questions?
Yeah, I had a follow-up question just on the fire question that Chair Graytrick asked. You had mentioned kind of building standards, and I know, or I believe that our townhome development codes have kind of building standards around firewalls. Is that something that also moves into kind of the cottage cluster or single family space?
Well, I think when you're referring to townhomes, again, I'm not speculating, but just talking from a little bit of what I understand tangentially about building code. So we're talking about attached structures, and because they're individual units, they have different requirements for fire protection than I think a standard single unit would around its exterior walls, because of the possibility of the unit next door that you're not in charge of, that is attached to your building, leaving the stove on or something and causing a fire, so needing some protection there. But where we're talking about individual cottages, I think my guess is they're just meeting the same kind of building fire safety code as a single detached unit by itself on the lot would be. And the building code does have minimum separation requirements, because some cottage clusters are being kind of further divided in almost like a condo kind of way, so that people can own their own units. Those new type of lot lines drawn around the cottages, the building code considers like kind of a standard lot line. And so there's a requirement that the wall of that structure be at least 3 feet away from the new the new lot line. And so where you have multiple cottages, the closest they should be together physically is 6 feet because they're each 3 feet from a hypothetical possible ownership line. If that makes sense. Thanks.
Any additional questions for staff?
I have. In some of the language here around the variance will not be detrimental to surrounding properties, natural resource areas, or public health, safety, or welfare. I mean, there was a little bit of talk about just like the impact to property values. And we've talked a lot about safety and health. But, you know, in terms of knowing that, you know, there's issues with the market and some of the struggles with comparables on some of these cottage clusters, you know, I'm assuming the answer is no, that's not taken into consideration when looking at when the definition of detrimental to welfare, that's not something that is considered in the variance request process.
Right, getting at some of those larger concerns about, sure, property values or market values, those aren't really taken into consideration. It's more about, I think the way I've tried to approach this is it's about the request to reduce the side setback by 2 feet and not about the allowance of cottage clusters in the zone, how many units there will be, but really kind of looking at whether there are any impacts from that 2-foot separation related to things that we could either impose a condition on to try to address and mitigate, or that we could otherwise somehow defend in the findings that we write as being, I don't know, somehow unique to this thing, or something that could arguably be defended if challenged, I guess.
Does any member of the Planning Commission have any questions regarding testimony to this point?
Actually, do have a question about testimony. There was a reference and a description about meeting the need for housing and the talk about the, you know, the pipeline of development that has been experienced in the Ardenwell neighborhood, 500 new homes in 3 years. And there was a code reference, but I didn't get it, 19.91 something about meeting the need. So can you kind of expand on where that fits in the variance approval process, or if it does?
I think that was in reference to a House bill or Senate bill, and not to a code based on the House housing mandates, the state housing mandates, and the goals from housing production.
Yep. That's not in our code, so I believe you're right. That's from 1537 is my guess. Yeah.
I've got another kind of clarifying question for staff. Some of the testimony I think we received tonight spoke to the purpose statement on variances. That's 19.911.1. And some of the testimony, you know, talked about imposing undue hardship and other things like that. I know the purpose statement isn't part of the applicable criteria, but can you help us understand the relationship between said purpose statement and kind of the decision-making process on this, especially as I think some testimony was saying didn't feel like the purpose was being met and instead the variance was being treated almost as an entitlement.
The purpose statement helps to sort of explain kind of the basic tenets of what variances are for. And you're correct that, there are a lot of things written in this purpose statement, including, preventing reasonable development or imposing undue hardship. As you said, it's talking about intending to provide some flexibility while ensuring the intent of each development standard is met, which is kind of the idea. So there are a lot of things that are talked about in the purpose statement. But at the end of the day, when it comes to sort of the applicability of the variances, what kind of variances can you receive? And especially in this particular case, we're talking about the type 2 variances, so there's a whole list, or what their limited variations to numerical standards. And then there's the list, one of which is a variance of up to 40% to a side yard, standard. And then then we go into the approval criteria. So while we do have a general purpose statement, it's not tied to the approval criteria. It's sort of a general explanation of why we have variances and what they're for. It's a good question. But when we're evaluating a variance application, it's the approval criteria that we're getting to. The applicant is not required to meet a hardship requirement or provide a hardship in order to be eligible for the variance.
If there's no further questions from the planning commissioners, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing.
Chair, if I may, I'd like to just make a comment. We've heard a lot of testimony tonight, and some of it's been based on the approval criteria, some of it hasn't been. Some of it's been personal in nature, based on experiences with the developer, even at other developments. And I just want to caution you that your deliberations and your decision tonight is required by state law to be based on the approval criteria for this particular application. And there shouldn't be any deliberation or discussion about some of those extraneous issues. I certainly appreciate the appellant's desire to put on the record the way she was treated, and some of her neighbors and other concerned citizens have rightfully stood up for her. And I think that's commendable for everybody in the audience. But the state law really mandates that our decision be based on the applicable approval criteria, and I would caution you to make sure your deliberations head in that direction.
Thank you.
Maybe one more question from my side, and Justin, from a legal definition, we look at the approval criteria for variances, some of those being welfare, detrimental to surrounding properties. Is there any examples we can lean on as we consider those terms? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
It's okay to put me on the spot. I don't know what you mean by examples, right? I mean, it's something for you guys to talk about. However, as Commissioner Travis pointed out or asked about, the financial impact of whether a development negatively impacts your property is not something we typically consider. If you don't like the way something looks, that's not something that we consider. If you don't like the developer who's building it, it's not something we consider when we're applying the criteria, right? Trying to think of an example of a variance request that could impact, help me out, that could impact. Typically, the reason why we have variances is we would love to live in a rectilinear world, right? Where everything's a square box. Frequently, we're facing a piece of property that wants to develop something and it doesn't fit the cookie cutter that the code provides. And so we allow an applicant to apply for a variance, and you are entitled to apply to a variance to any standard. In fact, across the entire city, for any development code provision, you're allowed to apply for a variance to it and make an attempt to meet the approval criteria that are set out in the code to obtain that variance. And I appreciate a planning manager's discussion about the purpose statement. It does say a lot of things. It's old. Those things never get amended when we amend the code. They probably should, because somebody wrote that and it blabs a whole lot, but it doesn't change the fact that an applicant's entitled to apply for a variance. And in order to get that variance, he has to meet certain approval criteria. Now, whether something, I think staff would guide you if you had a question about something like, is this really the type of impact we're looking at? Some of the crazier examples that I pointed out, value, you don't like the way it looks. Those aren't the types of impacts we look at. You could have a variance maybe to a setback that's causing hardship from a view line from an intersection, or a variety of other things that are that have measurable impacts to safety, for instance, right? That is something that the code's actually thinking about. That's one I just pulled out of my back pocket. I can't think of a variance that we've had that triggers that. Setback variances, I was really curious to see what number Vera was going to come back with, because it's probably the largest number of variances that we address deal with setbacks, because again, we're not in a rectilinear world, right? Everything is not shaped perfectly. And our code says 6 feet or 5 feet or 20 feet or whatever. It's difficult sometimes for a developer to fit within that shoebox. And so we allow them to seek a variance. I'm not sure whether I helped to hurt your question, but.
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, the public testimony portion of the hearing on the appeal of file VR-2026-008, appeal file number AP-2026-002 is now closed. Is the commission ready for discussion? Well, as is standard, and I know it's been a couple meetings, but I would like to open the floor to you first, Vice Chair Pettit.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff for your presentation. And thank you to those in the room and online for showing up. It's always nice when we're not talking to a bunch of empty chairs. Feel free to come again. Today we're talking about cottage clusters, and they're a new and exciting kind of development that we're seeing more and more of, and it's something that we're still figuring out. We're actively having conversations about all the time in planning commission. I would encourage all of you here to come to our work session meetings where we have these conversations about what cottage clusters will look like in the future in Milwaukie. But today I do want to just kind of zoom in on the applicable criteria of this application, where we are discussing the variance for the side setback of this development. I am satisfied with staff's findings on some of the points that have been raised regarding fire safety and such things. I understand that we can't, we won't be discussing matters such as transportation. I know that's a big deal to lots in the audience, but not within the purview of this application. It is my understanding that the original application was approved with conditions for there to be a 6-foot fence. Should this appeal be denied, it is my understanding that would be upheld with the 6-foot fence. And I would encourage all parties involved to continue dialogue amongst yourselves and with the developer to seek a amenable agreement to the fence, be it if you want to seek a higher fence, the 8 foot with an additional variance, and try and maintain healthy dialogue between yourselves. But my stance is that I am comfortable with staff's findings and would be willing to uphold the original findings of denying the appeal and retaining the original decision with the condition of the 6-foot fence, which I do believe was in there. Did I miss see that? Okay.
Thank you. Open the floor for additional comments.
Yeah, I have some additional comments. I actually don't feel satisfied with the public safety, discussion here. I would prefer if there was comment and, subject matter expertise from the fire marshal. I think that we're seeing a lot of these variance requests. I know we're talking only about this application, but just because we haven't had any detrimental experiences with these developments and reduced side yard setbacks I think that it's good to investigate it and make sure that we are doing the right thing here. And I guess I'm not comfortable with like silence and they haven't commented on it. I'd prefer it if we could hear it from the fire marshal and other public safety that that they can get to the windows, they can, rescue folks, as was kind of discussed, especially people with disabilities or wheelchairs and so forth. So I guess I don't feel completely satisfied with the staff report about the public safety.
Can I ask a follow-up? Are you indicating that you would like to see that sort of information from those entities, perhaps if we were to issue, I believe it would be a continuation. If we were to issue a continuation, sounds like that's what you are proposing?
Correct, okay. Yeah.
So maybe building on Commissioner Travis's comment, I think I do feel like I have some concerns on what we've heard kind of in, I think, some robust dialogue and building a pretty comprehensive kind of record on, potential kind of public safety or public kind of welfare concerns. I think we had nearly 10 remarks about fire safety concerns, loss of defensible space. I think we probably had about a half dozen remarks about transportation safety concerns, particularly also near kind of an adjacent park. I think we've also heard concerns about one person, apologize, I didn't write down your last name, but Abigail mentioned water drainage concerns from having parcels or having sites close to property lines. And then, a small handful of folks also mentioned kind of sunlight and access to sunlight, which feels like it could be a matter of kind of broader public welfare. So, I have some concerns that some of this isn't necessarily kind of documented in these findings. When you look at the first approval criteria, talks about the variance and the cumulative effect of variance is not having detrimental or surrounding impacts surrounding properties, natural resources, public health, and kind of all of the things I just spoke about aren't reflected there, and then aren't debated and kind of and said that they're not an issue. So I think just from kind of a matter of fact, those issues that have been raised aren't reflected kind of in the conditions and then landed with some support or not support. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Are you considering also requesting a continuation for additional information gathering or?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That's a great question. I don't feel like I need additional information.
Okay.
I appreciate the great work that Mr. Kelver does. And I do think I even wanted to kind of mention that, I really appreciate, Brett, your kind of engagement with community members. You had a very clear, we got to read some of your email exchanges with people, very clear, very professional. I even think some of them thanked you for that. But I think to the question of whether or not the initial decision has findings or conditions that are in error, as a matter of fact, I would suggest maybe there are some pieces that were not addressed currently in the conditions as written, that could be debated more.
Do you want to elaborate on the potential errors?
I mean, I think as I was kind of suggesting in this, page 8 of 10, which talks about the approval criteria. The first criterion talks about not having detrimental impact surrounding properties, public health, safety, or welfare. And if you read through the description here, I think we've done a really good job talking about kind of privacy issues, which were probably some of the primary issues that were originally raised. So I think to, again, be fair to staff, some of the things that have been entered kind of into the record tonight weren't necessarily things you were able to kind of respond to. But, in looking through here, you see kind of this kind of narrative around privacy. On flipping over to page 9, that the reduced setback from 5 feet to 3 feet will not result in any significant impacts to neighboring properties. I think we've heard very clearly a number of different concerns that aren't captured here and aren't debated in a way where you would say, we heard about fire, and because of what we heard from the fire marshal, it's not a concern. We heard about transportation safety, and because of XYZ, it's not a concern. We heard about drainage, and because of this fact, it's not a concern. We don't have any of that in the record here in the conditions as currently written. And again, I don't think that's any short sight on staff. I think we've received kind of a substantial amount of information this evening that weren't able to kind of prepare for in advance. So I think that's, I guess, what I'm kind of, if does that elaboration help you, Commissioner Hess?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think from my perspective, when considering that, it's, and maybe this is what Brett, we can speculate what Brett thinks about when he's going through this, but it's, where do you draw the line of, how far down the rabbit hole do you go on defending every decision? I think from a safety perspective that, there is concern from a fire point of view, but also that minimum setback is based on that minimum fire setback. I was doing some research into the Oregon Residential Specialty Code, which I think our municipal code probably follows. And they talk about that 3-foot minimum here, if I can find it again. But I think it's a valid concern. There is a risk when you have structures that are close together, but we have, I would say, the experts, or I would assume the experts that are putting together this state building code, defining what that fire setback is. And so I think we need to take that into consideration. I'm not opposed to having the fire marshal come in and do a review, offer an opinion on what this setback means from a fire life and safety perspective. But I think we have that kind of standard in place for a reason, because that has been objectively defined previously.
Just to clarify, when you say that standard, you mean the 5-foot standard?
The 3-foot.
Or the 3-foot? What they're requesting?
Because that is our minimum, yeah. Regardless of any variances being requested today, from a safety perspective, the building code is requiring a 3-foot minimum from a, minimum fire setback from a property line. So as Brett mentioned earlier, if you have 2 3-foot, say setbacks, you would have a 6-foot minimum clearance.
Yeah, thank you, staff, for the report, and thank you for everybody that came out and testified. This is a, but when we're talking about the approval criteria, I'm kind of hung up a little bit on the approval criteria, number 1 particularly, that my fellow commissioners have talked about with the detrimental to surrounding properties. And I think, thanks for the fire code clarification. I did think I read 3-foot as well. And I was kind of concerned about how close the adjacent property is to the property line. So now you've got 2 properties that are right next to each other, as opposed to maybe one being 3 foot and the next one being larger. So you have 2 really close together properties, which is kind of concerning to me. And I guess as far as the definition of detrimental and what that criteria for detrimental is, I'm a little still unclear on that. But if I had to just kind of go off of the testimony we've heard and the approval criteria, saying that the proposed variance would not be detrimental to surrounding properties, I'm having a hard time thinking that it wouldn't be detrimental. I think the setback variance would be detrimental to the surrounding properties. Anyway, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Commissioner Lowther, can you say the last part again? You think the variance is detrimental to surrounding properties?
I think the approval criteria where it says the proposed variance would not be detrimental, I think this variance would be detrimental.
Okay.
So,
I would just like to point out, as you continue to deliberate, I suppose a decision as to whether or not we're going to continue the hearing to a date certain to get maybe some more clarification on some of these issues. But to the extent you are pontificating on whether or not it's detrimental, please know that we need to articulate how for the findings if the decision goes that way, whether that's tonight or another night. It's not enough to just say, oh, I think it's detrimental to the surrounding properties. You have to be very specific, and we have to have a finding that identifies, and there needs to be evidence in the record to support your determination, right? So you can't just say, oh, I think this. You have to have some evidence in the record to support what you are finding. Does that make sense? Okay.
and is testimony tonight part of the record that we could use as evidence?
I mean, yes, you can use testimony, but again, you have to weigh not necessarily the credibility of the testimony, but the weight of the testimony, right? So somebody coming and saying, I don't want to isolate an issue, but I'm going to use it as an example. Somebody coming and saying, I'm fearful of a fire hazard if you allow this setback. That testimony should be garnered probably less weight, and this is for your determination as individual commissioners, than say the fire marshal coming and testifying or submitting a document that says we don't have a concern with fire, right? So you have to weigh the value or the weight that you would give testimony. It doesn't mean that the person who's concerned is wrong. It just means that their testimony might not have as much weight as the fire marshal would when it comes to fire hazard. Does that articulate it well enough?
And we heard from a first responder, I believe, tonight. So I don't know if that would lend more credibility to that testimony.
Well, typically when you have somebody who comes forward who testifies in their capacity, they have to elaborate on what they've done and what
code
they've done.
And different
right,
things,
exactly,
perhaps,
right, in order to gain the accolades of being able to testify as maybe an expert or somebody whose testimony should be given more weight. Does that make sense?
Yes, yep.
Might be a clarifying question for staff, if we can go back to that, and I'll look to either the chair or the lawyer, but I think to Commissioner Lowther's kind of question or about setbacks and concerns there, and knowing the appellant is living directly next door, and I believe it was talked about in terms of, you know, concerns about fire safety, structural risk, loss of defensible space. Not to say that Google Maps is the arbiter of truth, but it appears that that their house is potentially right on the lot line. Is that, or pretty close? Does that sound factually correct?
Yeah, I can't say that for sure.
Okay.
I would note that it did appear that way to me as well. I was actually trying to figure out if perhaps that dwelling had at one point gotten a variance or something, because it did seem very close to the line.
There might even be a corner of it that's over the line too,
Yeah.
but that's a separate issue.
I think that there have been some really valid points that have been brought up, but before I go into that, I just want to outright say thank you very much for everybody who's spoke here and virtually. I do very much appreciate hearing your perspective a lot. I appreciate your concern for your neighbors and for your community. We, as volunteers here for the city, all care about our community. Like, that's why we're here. We have to balance certain things, and that's an important element of what we are doing now. But I do want to thank you for your time and for speaking. I also just want to state that working through our democratic process and being able to submit an appeal within the allotted time, I think is an important right that we have in our city. And I was disheartened to hear that folks have been dissuaded from basically, you know, taking that right and moving forward with it. I find that extremely unfortunate. I think that it's very important to separate out the variance from the greater development. And that's really hard to do. We have had to do that here on the commission multiple times, where we have had variances where the variance, what's being requested, the part that is at question and the part that we actually have the authority to help provide this feedback on is very, very narrow. And the project overall has elements that folks may have concerns with that are not related to the purview of what we can review. I do think that I don't believe there was any sort of egregious error or intentional error or conflict, obviously, with the city. I don't believe that there were but I do feel that the fire safety there are concerns there, and just the fact that there is not there wasn't a comment from the fire marshal or somebody, nobody responded back. That doesn't, you know, that I think they get sent to all of these, right? They get forwarded, they get CC'd on all these new developments. That doesn't mean that they look at them all very closely. I mean, not to discourage our fire.
We frequently, I mean, frequent's hard to say, but we hear from them when they have concerns on applications, particularly with larger developments. They really, they look to see whether there's enough space for the vehicles to move, to turn around. So we've had that pop up in several issues during my tenure here. But there's somebody whose job is assigned to do this, and they churn through them. So they do look at the applications. It doesn't, if you want to get an affirmative statement from the fire marshal, that's fine. That's a different issue. But I would not imply that they don't look at the applications that come through.
Fair enough. That's a very good point. I do support the idea or I support the move to potentially have a continuation and seek more information from the fire marshal. Perhaps like direct comment, not necessarily just they were sent it. Obviously, they could have commented if they had a concern, but in theory. But just not having any feedback, like, so there's nothing to really level there. So I do think that it would be helpful to have that feedback.
I think if I could, I think what is reasonable to expect is that staff will contact the fire marshal and they will likely submit a letter to us. I don't think you'll have the fire marshal come here to testify. I think you'll likely get a letter that says we've reviewed the application and whatever findings or however they want. Or if they happen to have not looked and they do have a concern, they might raise it in that letter.
Okay.
Just to set expectations for what you might get.
Yeah, I think our expectation is to get just additional, the words, the factual content, the documents. We're really good at sifting through those and trying to find pieces that are really important. So if we can get that content, we don't need to be able to speak to somebody directly, but if we could just get some sort of written feedback. I think that's really important, to be frank, because of the multiple concerns that have been raised. I don't feel that we can adequately state that we fully understand those concerns without that feedback from that professional who understands that area. It's not an area any of us are really able to speak to personally or professionally. So I think that's valuable.
So Chair, if I may, if we're continuing the hearing, are we, I guess, because we're also seeking some additional information from the fire marshal, we're keeping the record open?
I believe that would keep the record open.
So anyone in the community could submit additional comment on any of the issues that have been raised tonight or anything else that comes up?
Would there be a scenario where it is closed and we are seeking this specific piece of information additional?
I guess we've already closed it, so we didn't
Oh, yes.
reopen.
Yeah, reopen.
Or, yeah. Do you want to take a bio break?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's take
Can
a
we take a 5-minute
break.
break?
Let's take a short break. I want to confer with the planning manager and I also want to think about something while you all go to the bathroom.
I will now call a recess. We are now back from recess. Thank you for your patience. First, I would just like to confirm that there are no other high-level requests from commissioners about, I guess, how we, the next steps on proceeding. If there's anyone who feels strongly, as Kim did, I just wanted to make sure that we're hearing any other high-level thoughts about whether we would need to have a continuation.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I have one more. Since it was brought up about drainage, I am concerned about any detrimental impacts to adjacent properties if the drainage isn't handled properly.
Okay.
And I don't think I need a continuation. I'm ready to vote this evening if necessary.
I think with the questions that are that have been risen, particularly as they refer to fire safety and drainage, and allowing us to have more structured feedback on what detrimental means and what that should be, how we define that. We are going to, I would propose, and I assume do we all need to vote on whether or not we move forward with this proposal? That's what I thought, okay. I would propose that we move to a continuation until September 8th. And if that's to occur, I would reopen the record to allow for testimony to be accepted until September 8th. So that I move for that.
You can't move, you're the chair.
All right, I open up, I open up for folks to move for that.
I guess my light's on. I'll move to continue the hearing to September 8th and reopen the record for public testimony. And until then, it's getting late.
I second that motion.
So with that, let's take a vote. I will ask for a roll call.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to continue the hearing to September 8th. Commissioner Travis?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman?
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Lowther?
Aye.
Commissioner Hess?
Aye.
Vice Chair Pennick?
Aye.
Chair Graytrick?
Aye.
Motion passes. Hearing will be continued to September 8th.
And my hesitation was we're also reopening the record because it's not just continuing, it's reopening the record and continuing. Thank you.
Thank you for, you can leave. At this point in the agenda, the commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Does anyone, including audience members, have any items to report? Not at this time. I hope you're enjoying the concerts in the park. They are so much fun. I encourage you to get out and meet more community members. Do commissioners have any other items for discussion?
Had two things. One, a request for staff to maybe chat with other staff, but knowing that I think the Community Development Department's doing kind of a downtown parking strategy study. I don't know if there'd be an opportunity to get a briefing on that at the Planning Commission. I unfortunately had another civic commitment last night and wasn't able to attend the event they had, but just knowing that land use and transportation are so interconnected, and we're thinking about transportation policy at a really high level, it'd be very interesting to just kind of understand where that project is. And so if that's possible, just given their timelines and all of that. And then the second thing, also kind of transportation related, I've mentioned it to, I think, a few city staff members, but as some of you might have seen in Willamette Week a month or two ago, knowing that the railroad is a topic of interest and concern to some in Milwaukie, Union Pacific Railroad, and I think it's BNSF, no, it's not BNSF, it's a different railroad, have proposed a large merger that is estimated to, if approved, increase rail traffic by 22%. And there's an opportunity where the city of Milwaukie could weigh in on that and think about mitigation and flagging kind of key issues. So I would just want to maybe encourage staff to think about that and taking advantage of it. I believe there's something like just under 85 days left in the public comment process. So wanted to flag that. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Is the railroad thing for staff or the public?
Probably more for staff, but I do think flagging it just for community members to be aware of it would be helpful.
Thank you. Can we review the agenda for our forecast for future meetings?
Okay. We have an item on September 8th, a continued hearing from tonight. And then we do on September 22nd, we have 3 public hearings on that night. We have a Willamette Greenway review. We have a rezoning of the property at 9770 Southeast Stanley Avenue. It's right across from Ball Michelle Park. The proposal is to rezone that property to small mixed use. So following kind of on the hubs discussion. And then we have the public hearing on the housekeeping code amendments. And then on October 13th, the hearing will be on the policy light code amendment package as well. So busy next few weeks.
All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay.
Aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned.